Command Point now has merch. Link in the description. Warzone Studio was kind enough to send out a couple of their battle mitts for us to review, and I have to say, you guys, I absolutely love them. The mats we received have the kill team layout on them, making it quicker and easier to place objectives and terrain pieces to create a good play experience. The mousepad material the mats are made from is an upgrade from the foldable cardstock boards that you are used to seeing come in kill team boxes. Warzone Studio are even helping support the channel by giving us a kickback for each order placed using the link in the description below. So make sure to check them out, and thank you to Warzone Studio for sponsoring this video.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point, and welcome to the 10th day of Kill Team here today. We're going to be talking about an old favorite of mine that I haven't played in many, many days, none other than the Wyrmblade of the Gene Stealer cult. And today I'm joined to talk about Wyrmblade by JD, who placed top 3 at numerous tournaments throughout 2023 with Wyrmblade. How's it going?
Going well. Top 3 is the best I can claim. I don't think I've won an event outside of an RTT at this point.
Well, top 3 at, I believe it was Adepticon, and Chicago was one of them? Or not Chicago, remind me.
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
We did a small GT down in the St. Louis area that I managed to get third place in as well.
Nice. Well, in the realm of Wyrmblade, that is more than just about anybody can say for the most part. So very happy to have you on here today. So I guess to get us started, I wanted to talk specifically for somebody that is looking to pick a new faction, and maybe they like Gene Stealer Cult, for whichever reason Wyrmblade has gravitated towards them. How would you describe the play style of Wyrmblade?
The playstyle Wyrmblade is there's two parts. Like for a new player, if you don't like scratching your head over who to start concealed engaged, it's great to have a team that just doesn't have to worry about any of that bullshit. You just start concealed, and it's up to your opponent to kind of decide. And I guess that is kind of the play style, is you're setting up. They play very true to kind of like the theme of Gene Stealer Colts. You're kind of trying to form a trap for your opponent and hit them as hard as you can. And they're the ones usually racking their head over kind of like how to minimize whatever like bullshit you're kind of like trying to catch them in.
Okay, very cool. And I guess for you, what about that appealed to you? Because you played a lot of Wyrmblade.
So I think I've mentioned it a couple times now. It was more happenstance than anything else. I ended up playing Gene Stealer Colts because I do play factions that kind of have a thing going for me. Like, so my original 40k army has been Ultramarines for almost a decade. The courage and honor, as cliche as it is, they're my guys. They're the least kind of shitty guys that the Imperium has, or they're like you wouldn't turn down living there, unlike the rest of the Imperium. So that's kind of why they appeal to me. They're the kind of the noblest people in kind of a setting filled with shitheads. When it came to Gene Stealer Cult, it was more kind of, I like the appeal of kind of like the downtrodden underclass aspect of them. There's heavy leftist, like a communist uprising themes behind them. And of course, since it's 40k, as maybe just and right as their cause is or their complaints are, of course the end result is bad because it's 40k and there's no hope for anyone. They're doomed to be literally eaten by the revolution. So that's kind of that was why they became like my second army, so to speak. Was because I started playing the Necromunda, and when Kill Team 2.0 came out, I had just kind of completed painting a Necromunda gang for Gene Stealer Colts, and they just stuck. The rules came out. I just started Kill Team. Like, I like this rule set, and I had some strong luck with them right out the gate, and I've just been sticking with them ever since.
Nice, very cool. So first and foremost, as far as we get into the gameplay aspect of it, And I think Wyrmblade has a really interesting answer to this question, maybe just because of one of their main mechanics. But I think one of the trickiest parts of getting into a new team is kind of deciphering how you like to play on turn one, and what your game plan is, and what your win conditions are, and when to change up the plan. So what's your general approach with Wyrmblade on turn one?
So my general approach on Wyrmblade turn one is there's two goals. The primary goal is to not lose anyone and set up for turn two. Because obviously Colt Ambush uh, is a very powerful team ability. It's the closest thing to dice fixing you're kind of gonna get on a lot of teams, aside from like teams that have to build up to it, like Pathfinders or something, or teams that build into it over time, like Blooded. When the Blooded tokens build up, you're looking to kind of do as much as you can in a single turning point. So that's the primary thing. Don't lose a guy unnecessarily and set up for turn two. Your second goal is to, if you can, do as much damage to your opponent on turning point one without essentially getting hit back. And that a lot of times is kind of the rub. A clever opponent might give you a really hard choice where it's like, hey, do you want to shoot me? And you're risking obviously screwing it up. You do have a single, I guess, pass on that, which is you can use the return to the shadows ploy to switch back to conceal with one operative. But once that's been used up, you're kind of sitting out there, unless you bring the sniper, in which case you might have two guys who can take shots at your opponent. There are other ways you can do that. You can use the hiding operatives to kind of jump in at the end of a turning point and take some pot shots at people. So those are usually two goals. Set up for two and see if I can pick off something on one without losing anything in return.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, really interesting. So I guess one fun question here. If you can think back to a moment, whether it's at a tournament or just, playing them at your local store, just playing with friends, try to think back at what you would describe as the flashiest, most spicy Wyrmblade play you've made, something that really jumped off the table at you or your opponent. So, well, what's the coolest play you can think of that you've made with Wyrmblade?
I don't think there's anything too crazy there. They have no AP boosting abilities, so you can't kind of do. If your opponent is versed in the team, they kind of know what you can do. But the closest thing to like flashy plays would be dropping operatives in from hiding at the end of a turning point, like especially in turning point one, to kind of snag objectives from your opponent to maybe swing a 4-2 on the end of the first turning point. Using the Keller morph to double tap operatives, so to speak, as you would call it. I think maybe the wildest, like the thing that I've come to do a lot is the Locust is kind of one of my favorite operatives. It's not necessarily the deadliest. There's a lot of things that can stop him, but for example, on Octarius terrain, you can block doors with barricades and then use your writhing ingress ploy to essentially put a hole in the wall right next to where you've blocked the door with the barricade.
Mm-hmm.
So the Locust is essentially blocking the door that also has a barricade on it, and then he can use Quicksilver Strike to, if someone else comes to the other side of the door, to essentially charge around and through the hole you've made to the other side of the door.
Oh, yeah.
That's one that can like really take people by surprise. I usually warn them at this point about it, but it's a good zoning mechanic. Another good one is, if you can pull it off, is if you have, for example, the blasting charge and the frag grenade on your GA2 operatives, you can, if your opponent leaves themselves open to a blast, you can pull off a pretty harsh double blast attack with them.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, they are a gang that's just about kind of really not taking risks. I find that often when I take unnecessary risks, I am often punished for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to minimize the amount of damage that your opponent can do to you at any single activation.
Okay. Yeah, really interesting. I love hearing you talk about the Locust. I've always been a really big fan of the Locust. Feels like when I watch a lot of Wyrmblade players, I see a lot of the sniper instead of the Locust, but it's kind of a back and forth there. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit with you about matchups, specifically as far as Not necessarily specific factions in general, but I guess what types of teams do you struggle against? And if there's anything that comes to mind, I guess what about those teams are difficult for you to play
Yeah,
against with Wyrmblade?
that's a common question. I won't say they don't have anyone I consider like auto wins against. I
Hmm.
would have called like Votan or higher tech auto wins before they kind of really got buffed. But they weren't the only Wyrmblade aren't the only people that were good against them at that point.
Yeah.
Uh, I would say teams that worry me. I haven't played Pathfinders in ages, but back when they were very popular, they were a team that I kind of dreaded to play against because Wyrmblade do kind of really ride once they've switched to engage. Like any horde team, they're really counting on that auto retain cover save to
Hmm.
like keep them hanging around with 2 to 3 wounds. And Pathfinders just kind of say no to that, and your guys disappear the second they're looked at. So that has been a boogeyman for a while. Um, Intercession squad is not fun. As Wyrmblade, intercession can often feel like you've done everything correctly, and your opponent just kind of, through a combination of ceaseless bolt guns and either the tactical or devastator doctrine, just kind of rolls you off the table.
Yeah.
Uh, that's probably the most kind of like where the luck of the die is kind of matchup, in my opinion. Um, Try to think who else is a on open higher tech now that they've been buffed can be rather savage
Oh yeah.
if you especially with the crypt tech uh, flying around doing his stuff, and if the is it the nano mine,
Yes.
the slow you down mine, that if that's in a particularly uncomfortable position, that's a little balanced out by the fact that I don't really fear them at all on close quarters.
Hmm.
Uh, so there is that trade off. Recently played not Votan, but Salvagers, and they're less of a concern. Uh, I would think of Felgor Ravagers as a team that they're very well suited to fight against, although recently a local guy beat me with them, so I can't call that as much of a layup as I might have thought it would be. So yeah, I would say Intercession, Pathfinders are the two biggest ones. Void Dancers are someone who I've always been afraid of, but that's another team I haven't played in what feels like a year.
Right.
so
Right. Okay.
but I think everyone fears Void Dancers on some level.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, all right. So I wanted to ask you a pretty interesting one, in my opinion, is for a new player. I'm sure you've seen Wyrmblade's been out for a while. I'm sure you've seen other Wyrmblade players come and go, and you've kind of watched people figure out that team. And I guess even harkening back to when you were learning the team, what would you say is the most common mistake that Wyrmblade players make? Where if they just fixed this one flaw in their game, it might help elevate them quite a bit.
So that's actually a hard question because I don't know a lot of other Wormblade players.
Yeah.
They're, the funny thing is Wormblade are like my own personal like fear in the sense that I've done well with them, and at the end of the day, I'm like, are they just a really good team, and I'm a mediocre player, and no one else seems to notice that they're really good, or am I actually decent with them? Is always the question I ask myself because no one else plays them, so there's not really a pool to like go up against, I guess,
Yeah.
in that sense. I will. I think the main thing though is they just get too aggressive with them. There's a certain amount of I guess you feel very casual with them because once again you don't have to choose who's engaged or who's not, so you kind of feel like you can just kind of go into your opponent willy nilly. And yeah, I think some people like if it's two new players, the Wormblade player is probably going to do better because they ignore certain aspects of the game. They do have a strong basic rule set, but once that other player kind of learns their bullshit, I think it can swing back pretty drastically, and you kind of have to adjust how you approach the table. Um, but yeah, I think another common one is we mentioned the locust. People want that sniper. They think that sniper is great. There are matchups where you want the sniper. There are board setups where you want the sniper, but at the end of the day, I think I guess the thing is the team cannot ever afford to be static. Most of my games that I lose, it's because I'm trying to like set a mining laser on a vantage point or
Mhm.
keep the sniper on a vantage point. And if you're on a vantage point, where are you not? You're not next to an objective. And then you find at the end of the game, man, I really wish this guy had been somewhere more useful than trying to like line up the perfect kill shot, I guess,
Right.
at range.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool, cool. Um, really quick, because this is kind of a binary choice for a lot of players, but I don't know how much Wyrmblade have this question. What do you like to do for TAC Ops?
Uh, so I went back when I did Adepticon. I was the dork who like sat there and looked at every map and asked myself, based on which mission type and which map, would I take infiltrate or seek and destroy? Because that's they're the two options. They have faction tac ops, but at this point, their faction tac ops they're bad. Mark for assassination, I've taken on occasion, but I haven't taken in a while. There is a world in which infiltration is good. Certain close quarters maps can be very good for it. For example, I think there's a close quarters map where there's what 4 objective markers on the central line in 4 separate rooms.
Yes.
I forget which one that is. That one's actually very good for infiltrate. You can take install device for like the one time you'll ever take it,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and block off. You can use the locus and other operatives to basically zone a room out and install a device on that. But
Mm,
I will say at least in 75% of your matchups, you're probably going to go seek and destroy.
okay.
Usually when I try to get cute and play infiltrate, I end up regretting it. I think is
Okay.
that's like I want to say take infiltrate and use your big brain to kind of play around, but I feel like most of the time I take infiltrate, I'm in a position where I'm like, man, I really want to shoot this guy, but instead infiltrate is telling me to go hide my guy, and that is not the best like position to be in.
Right, right.
Obviously, infiltrate leans more heavily against elites too, and
Mhm.
I haven't played intercession or legionnaires in a bit, so I think you could make a strong case for infiltration in that case.
Okay.
But the second your opponent's team is 10 or higher, fuck it, seek and destroy, kill them.
Okay. All right. Final question. This is one of my favorite ones. It's maybe the most important one. Last year, I asked people what their favorite Christmas song was. This year, I'm asking you, what is your favorite Christmas movie if you have one?
Okay, I do have an answer to this.
Okay.
I just gotta reach back into my head for it. Um, so I'm sure at least at some point someone said Die Hard
Oh yeah,
already,
couple times, couple
and I'm
times.
not gonna say that. Uh, so okay, I think the best way to look at it is your favorite movie, in my opinion, is the movie you watch the most. So if I had to pick a Christmas movie that I've seen the most, it's probably A Christmas Story.
Okay.
Um, I haven't watched in a while, but I have long memories as a kid watching that, like 4 goddamn times, like
Oh
on
yeah,
Christmas
they would
Eve.
play it like all day.
Yeah, if I don't know how old you are, but they had the Superstation TBS,
Yep.
and that was on all the time. So I'm gonna go with The Christmas Story. Um, I guess we're going for a contemporary movie recently. Uh, Violent Night kicked major ass, and
Okay.
uh, and I'm a big horror guy, so I'm not sure if horror, like action and horror that are also Christmas themed, like Die Hard, count.
Okay.
So pure Christmas movie, Christmas Story. Number two, Krampus was very good
Krampus.
again.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Perfect. Well, JD, thank you for coming on and talking about Wyrmblade. Really appreciate it. Shout out to everybody watching, all the subscribers, everybody on Patreon. Have a happy holiday. Have a Merry Christmas. On the 11th day of Christmas tomorrow, we have another very special surprise if you're interested in pain-loving elves. So come tune in for that. And in the meantime, this is Shane and JD signing out.
Merry Christmas, everyone.